All right, in this video, we're going to be talking about converting from degrees to radians or radians to degrees, and just a few things to relate to and to think back on when you're talking about the unit circle. It is a unit circle because it has a radius of 1 unit. There are 360 degrees for one full positive revolution, or technically a negative, depending on whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise. And if it's in radians, it's going to be 2 pi radians. Now remember, with radians, you're talking about the length of the outside versus degrees, you're actually talking about the angle measurement that you are forming. So we're going to learn how to convert between the two. All right, so converting between these two measurements is pretty simple. You just need to remember what measurement you're converting to and which formula actually goes with that. So we are going to begin by talking about from degrees to radians, okay? So from degrees to radians, 1 degree equals pi over 180 radians. So basically what you're going to do here is if you're given your degree measurement, you're going to take your degree measurement and you're going to multiply that degree measurement by pi over 180. And you're going to simplify from there. And that will give you how many radians is equivalent to that number of degrees. So for the first example A, I have 135 degrees. So I'm going to take 135 degrees and I'm going to multiply that by pi over 180. Now, I'm going to simplify this. So that's going to be 135 pi over 180 degrees. Now, at this point, I have converted into radians, but we want to simplify that. And I normally, and most of the time, in any math class, you're going to leave it in terms of pi. Leaving in terms of pi means that you're simply going to leave pi in the answer because pi is an irrational number, which means it has this decimal that does not stop. It doesn't terminate. So we don't want we don't have to round. We want an exact answer. So if I take 135 and I simplify 135 and 180 degrees, that is going to turn into 3 over 4. So my simplified answer for this in radians is 3 pi over 4 radians. Okay? So we started with 135 degrees and we convert it into radians and we have 3 pi over 4 radians. Now we can do the same thing with negative degrees, which negative degrees just means I'm rotating in the clockwise direction. It's just in the opposite direction of the unit circle. So same process. If I have a degree and I'm rotating it and I'm converting it into radians, I'm still going to multiply this by pi over 180. And that's going to give me negative 150 pi over 180 degrees. And again, this form is in radians. We just want to simplify it. And if I take 150 over 180 and I simplify that fraction, that is going to give me 5 over 6. So this is actually going to be negative 5 pi over 6 radians. All right. So that's converting from degrees to radians. Now, very similar process, but now we're going to take radians and we're going to convert it into degrees. So if I'm going from radians back into degrees, then that means that I'm going to flip that formula. So 1 radian equals 180 over pi degrees. So again, I would take my radian measurement that is given, and I'm going to multiply that by 180 over pi. Okay, so looking at example A in the next section, I have 7 pi over 6. I'm going to multiply that 7 pi over 6 times 180 over pi. Now, the great thing about this is if it's already in terms of pi, which means pi is in the answer, then there is a pi in the numerator and a pi in the denominator. So pi divided by pi equals 1. So those are going to go away. And then we're left with 7 times 180 degrees, which is going to give me 1,260 divided by 6. Well, 1,260 divided by 6 is going to give me 210 degrees. And that little O mark, or what looks like a superscript, an exponent, it means degrees. Again, same thing applies if it's a negative rotation. That negative rotation for radians is still going to be the same formula here, so I have it in radians. I'm going to multiply it by 180 over pi. All right, so again, I have a pi in the numerator, pi in the denominator, so those are going to equal 1, which is going to leave us with no pi in the problem. So negative 2 times 180, that's going to give me negative 360 degrees divided by 3. So at this point, if I have negative 360 divided by 3, that is going to give me negative 120 degrees as my degree measurement. So again, these mean this ultimately they're this different forms of measurement, but they are just measured in a different way. So degrees is measured with the angle that is being formed on the unit circle, and radians is being measured by the actual rotation around the circle, which is from the circumference. So one more time, just to make sure we're clear, if you're going from degrees to radians, so let me highlight here. So if we're going from degrees to radians, okay, then we're going to take the degree measurement and we're going to multiply that by pi over 180 degrees, okay? Now, if we're going from radians to degrees, we're going to multiply that radian by 180 over pi. And then just make sure you simplify for both, depending on whether you're going from degrees to radians or radians to degrees.